rocks. And my guest today, as part again of the interviews for City Council member, is Rick Ufford-Chase. Welcome back.
Thank you. It is wonderful to be here this time.
This could be fun.
I'm looking forward to the conversation.
What on earth made you decide to do this?
Oh, that's easy. I've spent the last 2 years and a little more now working with Newport City downtown development.
Right.
And increasingly, we are looking at long-term economic development strategies for our downtown and the things that will really help this downtown to become vibrant and vital again. And the more we do, the more clear it becomes to me and several others of us in that organization that we really need a city council that is savvy and understands what those opportunities might look like in the future. So I'm mostly doing this because I really believe in Newport. I love this community, and I want to be a part of making those changes happen.
That's neat. If I'd asked you this a year ago, are you going to run for City Council, Rick? What would you have said to me then?
If you'd have asked me 3 months ago, I'd have said, no way. It wasn't even on my radar.
Okay.
I spent, last year at this time, I was beating the bushes, trying to come up with great candidates to encourage to run for City Council and mayor. Right? And the struggle that I was having is that the people who I think are really, really viable potential candidates don't live within Newport City limits, right? And then I did the same thing last summer as we were looking at needing another mayor, right? And then as we rolled around on this time, I did the same thing again. I spent the fall scouring and beating the bushes, looking for somebody, trying to convince people. In fact, I was saying to people who I thought were really potentially great candidates, you should just move to Newport because you'd be great at this. And finally, I said to my wife, maybe we ought to do it and move from Lowell. And she said, that's not a totally crazy idea. I'd like to live in Newport. So here we are.
And here you are, and you now have a great house. You're genuinely part of the community. What I know about what you've done in the quote real world, as opposed to the City Council world, is that you have really been a strong part of helping Newport build community. Right.
Well, I started in the fall of 2021. So we were still very much in the throes of COVID at that point.
Right.
And the question was, how do we begin to create events that will bring the community together?
Right.
And the way we began was I asked my colleague, who shortly thereafter became the president of the board of Newport City Downtown Development, Sarah Chadburn, who grew up here in the area. She grew up in Glover, or West Glover, and lives here in the area and works at Community National Bank. And I said, Sarah, how do we get in touch with the young people, the young adults in this community? And she said, well, I could start with the Northeast Kingdom Young Adults, Young Professionals Association, right? So she gathered a group of friends, and I said, just bring them together. We met at the warehouse one afternoon, and I took my laptop, and I just said, you don't know me, and I'm not really here to guide a conversation. I want to hear what you all wish existed in Newport that doesn't. And I just took notes like crazy. And we began meeting monthly, and within 6 months, we came up with the idea of the Winter Saturdays that we did last year for the first time. And the whole point was low cost, local food, local bands, a chance to be together as community coming out of COVID, right? And to make it accessible for families was the priority for us. We really wanted the kind of thing that somebody might drive from Lowell or Irisburg or Holland to come and be a part of. And that, for 20 or 30 bucks plus their drinks, they could have dinner and their kids could see movies upstairs and everybody could be together. And it turned out to be a gold mine. It was, people just fell in love with the idea, and it's become the soul of Newport City downtown development. Really, those events that bring the community together are the heart of what we're doing now.
They're fun.
They're fun.
They're fun. They have us all talking again and dancing together.
Yeah, right, dancing together. And people would say to me early on, I got some naysayers who would say, nobody's going to come out, it's the middle of the winter, it's cold. I was like, you know what?
Sure,
my family's from Lowell. I have memories when I was a kid of my grandparents thinking that what was fun was going out at midnight on a snow machine.
Yeah.
Right? You can't tell me that the cold is what's keeping people home.
It's not.
What's keeping them home is there's nothing being offered that brings this community together.
Right.
And as soon as we created it, this year, gosh, they're blowing the doors off. We've had 100 people 3 out of the 4 weeks we've done our program so far this year with Winter Saturdays.
Yeah, it was packed when we were there.
Yeah,
it was
amazing.
Great. Yeah. So now that you've got a track record with community and community involvement, What is it that you want to do by becoming part of the City Council?
Well, more of the same, first of all. Where can the city be involved in helping to create the conditions for that kind of community spirit and engagement with one another, right? And I don't have clear understandings of that yet. Part of it will unfold as I and the rest of the council do our work, God willing, and I manage to get elected. So in addition to those community events that try and bring people together, part of what we have to think about is what's the heart of our local economy. And the mantra when I came in the door that was created by you and others, I think, long before I arrived here was, we have this beautiful location on the southern shore of Lake Memphremagog in the Green Mountains. We need to build our economy around that four-season outdoor recreation possibility, right?
Yes.
And, you know, Phil White and Kingdom Games has been doing this for years.
Yes, he has.
Mostly unsung in the local community, for my money.
Which is bizarre.
Which is crazy because he is a four-season outdoor recreation economy all by himself.
Absolutely.
So how do we build up Phil and other businesses and nonprofits that are already trying to do it? Northern Star, right? And Memphremagog Community Maritime, Memphremagog Trails with now more than 13 miles of mountain biking trails, right?
And ski trails.
Ski trails in the winter. Right, that's where they started, right? It wasn't mountain biking first, right? And snowshoeing and now this new little organization called NEK Guides, a young guy who's trying to do canoeing opportunities for folks on local rivers and the lake. There's a new Newport Community Sailing Center that we've started in the last year to offer sailing lessons on the lake. So what we're trying to do is just get all of these organizations to understand that they are part of a whole. We're working together, and together, collectively, we're trying to create the understanding and awareness that Newport is the hub of the Northern NEK's outdoor recreation possibilities. So we worked together like crazy, 11 different organizations in November and December to put together a $460,000 proposal to the state of Vermont to boost each of those 11 organizations individually and collectively to build a sense that we're all about this work together.
Fabulous. Any idea when you'll know if you hit goals?
Yeah, we'll know the end of February.
Oh, wow.
They tell us that we should have an answer at the end of February, and then it will take a couple of months to actually create what they call the executing agreements with the state. But I expect that this stuff, if we get it in February, you'll see the impact of it right away this summer.
Yeah, that's spectacular. It really is.
We're very excited about it. And, you know, there were 20 different volunteers who worked together to create this grant proposal. You know, there were 3 or 4 of us who spent hours the last week, 12-hour days back to back, pulling all the detail together. But there were 20 different people or more who were involved in actually writing their organization's piece of the collective whole. And we met together by Zoom every week for 6 weeks to craft this thing together. And we became friends in the process, joking around with each other. And there again, right? It's not just the mechanics of what we're doing, it's the community and the fabric of community that we're creating in the process that we're really excited about.
Yeah, and for very good reason. And I'm sort of tempted to say, okay, and what next are you planning on doing? But actually, I'd rather pick up with something that's in that because I think it's really important. It's the bringing people together. And I think over the last 10 years, I'll just focus on the 10 years, we've been blown apart, and it wasn't just COVID. And something that can bring people together professionally as well as socially. Talk about win-win. Right,
because in the long run, the thing that's going to hold the long-time families in this community together and hold them to and hold their kids for another generation here, right, is that sense that they have deep roots and current roots. That there's something alive and vibrant going on right now. And so, you know, so here are 2 other examples that we've partnered with the North Country Supervisory Union and with North Country Career Center to do that are aimed directly at that next generation, right? One is Newport City Downtown Development had this amazing opportunity last summer to work with Gwen Bailey Rowe from North Country Career Center. And we purchased, NCDD, our organization, purchased the house on the corner of Union and East Main, right, that old farmhouse. using money that the state provided at a 0% interest for us. So it's free money for us to
There's
buy
no
the
such
house.
thing. But yes, I
Right?
hear you.
It will be paid back.
Yes, exactly.
But at 0% interest. And the first payment isn't due until the kids finish the remodel on it.
Oh, wow.
So we bought the house. We have an almost unlimited amount of time to use it as a teaching opportunity, a live job learning opportunity for the kids, the young adults.
Skills building, right.
Skill building, right?
Yeah.
From the building trades program.
Yeah.
And they went to work on it right away back in September, and they're slowly poking at it, and you can kind of keep an eye on their outside progress, watching there.
I see it every time I come by.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
And I assume the stuff happening inside too.
Yes, they've almost completely demoed the inside of the building at this point. So all of the plaster walls are down. We don't have to do a major remodel on the interior. The layout of the house looks pretty good. But the hope is that we'll actually be able to configure the property so that we can fit at least 2 and maybe 3 other buildings on the property.
Wow.
And the next 4 or 5 or 6 years of work projects for the North Country Career Center are right there, 5 minutes away from the school. So that's one. And the second one I'm also very excited about. We got a grant in November from the Vermont Arts Council, a small grant, $15,000. And we used it to contract with the students in the advanced art class at the high school, April Kaspari's students.
I know that group.
And they created designs for us for a series of 10 sculptures that we are expecting to try and complete this winter and mount probably before the season, the June kind of summer season begins, on local buildings in our designated downtown. So that means these kids, again, I shouldn't use, I want to be careful about
Young
the word
people.
kids. That's what I call them. But the young adults,
Yes.
right, will be able to see themselves in their community.
Right.
And there was a young woman, the night I found out that we got the grant, I was up at the Price Chopper. It was Tuesday before Thanksgiving with my wife buying some last minute things. And I'm in line, and I was saying to my wife, it's so exciting, we got this grant from Vermont Arts Council today. And the woman at the cash register says to me, I recognize you, didn't you come to my class? And I wouldn't have recognized her. I'd been in her class one time, but she was one of those advanced art students. And I said, oh yeah, I've got the most exciting news. We got the funding and the project's going to go ahead. And she got so excited, she called 3 other friends from other cash registers over to meet me so that she could tell them how exciting it was that her artwork was going to be part of this project.
Yeah.
That's what we're aiming for, right? And you and others in this community have been trying to do that work, have been doing that work, not trying, for a long time. And we went through a dry spell, and we can reclaim it, right? It can be brought back. It's latent and just sitting there waiting for us to pick it up.
Right. And what that does to the lives of those young people is fabulous. That's a success to take forward, as opposed to feeling that you haven't achieved anything. What was the point, and what's the point of staying here anyway?
Right. Well, and as April says, part of what we're doing there is helping these young adults understand that their work has value.
Yes.
So we didn't just take their labor. $5,000 of the $15,000 grant from the Arts Council is going into a fund that the school keeps to fund the students to go on art trips to learn about, to go to New York and Washington, D.C., and I think they even do a European trip every couple of years. So that money will actually go into the fund that will help the students to do those trips in the future.
That is great.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is. And I love the marriage of business and art and community here, how all those pieces come together.
Right.
We need that.
Yep.
Do you see the council as a community?
I see the potential for the council to be the best of the community.
Right.
And I believe, having been a very close observer of the council for the last several years, that we have not had the opportunity, be careful how I say this, I suppose the opportunity was there. We have not had the conditions for the council to live into that opportunity. But council meetings shouldn't be something that people joke about or dread.
Right.
They should be a spirited conversation, even when we disagree.
Right.
At the end of which we say, okay, so we don't agree about this one thing, but we have so many, we're all doing this work because we care about this community. And the council is only the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Right? It matters what they say because there are so many projects we can't move on without their support.
Right.
But the real life of the community is in the people who elected that council and the folks who show up as volunteers and business people and residents and walk the neighborhoods and make Newport alive every single day.
I'm an old activist with emphasis on the old, but we believe that the power is at the grassroots, and we vote to elect representatives who are there to both represent us and to lead, to do a combination of that. It's an important role.
It is, and you're right, it's not just representing, right? That's key. It's actually also, you know, people talk about the fiduciary obligation, the financial obligation of a group of people like that. And it's true that they are responsible for making sure that we have a clean budget, right?
Absolutely.
And that we have good and transparent practice, and that we have good governance. But it's also true, as far as I'm concerned, that that group of people has an obligation to think about the things that we must risk for Newport to be and to become the vibrant community that we want it to for the next 20, 30, 50 years. So both things are true, and it takes some amount of daring on the part of the council to get there. You can't just, you've got to say yes to some things that may seem a little bit different in order to get to that. And you know, the models for that are pretty obvious. They're all around us. You know, you look at St. Albans, and the work that that city council has done over the last 10, 15 years to transform their community. Same thing in St. Johnsbury. Fabulous article this morning from Winooski in the Business Journal online, all about the ways in which these councils have been proactive at about imagining what could be, and then laying the conditions down for the whole community to work together to take us there.
It's hard for councils to do some of that, partly because the only time its members can come together is in that very public setting, and there's usually minutiae that has to be dealt with at the same time.
I've wondered about that. It's going to be a very interesting challenge if I'm elected, right? Because it's true that there needs to be generative space. Right? There needs to be space for people to actually do a little blue sky thinking in which they're not criticized for saying what may be outlandish things, right? That we haven't committed to. We're just, how do you find space? I've never been in public office before, right? I've had other offices that I've been elected to in non-public institutions. But a public office is going to be different, and I've got some stuff to learn about how that will operate.
It's different, and there'll be obviously a learning curve, but it could be a lot of fun too.
It could, and a lot of it has to do with the spirit with which we receive the community of people who care enough to come every 2 weeks and sit in that city council room with us. Right? How do you find ways for them to be appropriately engaged? And respectfully asked to give some room for the council to deliberate, right? I think it's going to be a balance.
It is a balance. And how do you encourage legitimate questions to come forward as opposed to taking pot shots just because you can?
Well, a non-defensive posture. Right? So that when
so
someone raises a
hard to
question,
do.
it is. And when you're in the public glare, this I have had experience with. I served as the highest elected official of the Presbyterian Church USA for 2 years.
That's a fairly humorless organization.
It was very challenging, right? It was in the middle of all of the culture war debates that were going on in our churches around full inclusion of LGBTQ folks.
And women.
And women, right? Well, I was later than that. We had pretty much settled those questions. But I was on the hot seat for some very, very high-end conversations, and a lot of people were writing me letters that had a lot of vitriol in them. And the question was, I answered in 2 years, I never failed to answer a single letter that was written to me unless it contained a direct threat, which happened every once in a while. But if it was relatively respectful, even if it used language that was hard for me to hear, I took the time to write back. And I would expect to try and do the same here, you know, to say, okay, I need to tell you, it's hard for me to hear it the way you just said it, and I'm going to look for what's in it that I need to pay attention to. And I would love to meet with you and have a cup of coffee and talk more about it when we aren't, you know, having to have this conversation in 30-second sound bites, which is kind of a necessary condition, or what, 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Right? A necessary condition of a city council meeting, I think.
Yes, it is.
But it doesn't mean we can't work to build relationships, even with the people with whom we disagree.
Oh, absolutely.
Outside of those meetings. And with each other when we disagree on the council.
Are you expecting to have to deal with the question about conflict of interest because you're
Oh,
working
sure.
in a downtown development organization?
Yeah, frankly, it's the first question I ask myself, right? I am involved in the kind of development of Newport every single day in my job, pretty much 7 days a week. And I love those questions. The question about conflict of interest, I've read this policy very carefully,
I bet.
is really all about the potential for personal gain. And are there places in which my being on council could result in personal gain? And if so, which can happen to anyone, right? It can happen to someone who's with the fire department who's on a select board or a council, or someone who, I don't know, I mean, there are all kinds of examples. A business person.
It's a small town, we all have some conflict.
Sure. So the question isn't how do you how do you elect someone who doesn't have a potential for conflict? It's how do you elect people with integrity who are willing to self-examine and name the moments when they think, you know, there's even an appearance that there could be a conflict here. I want to state that openly and ask for the judgment of the body. You know, maybe it's a lawyer who helps us decide that for the city. Maybe it's the city council itself. Sometimes it's going to be the people in the room who help me to understand that.
Believe me, they'll point it out.
They will, right? And then to try and recuse myself, not to try, to recuse myself in those moments and say, this isn't a vote that I have to be deeply involved in, or you know, I can step back from this particular vote. So there's only one obvious conflict as I think about starting out, and that is that the city has been in the habit the last several years of giving $30,000 a year to the budget of Newport City downtown development. That used to be 50% of our budget when I came in 2.5 years ago. Now it's 20% because we have a much larger budget and we're raising most of our money other ways. And so there are a couple of ways to solve that problem that I haven't fully explored.
You don't have to.
But I suspect we'll find a way to deal with that.
I just really wanted to make sure that it was out there and addressed because you know it's out there.
Here's what's not a conflict, Pam, and I want to be really clear about this too. There are all kinds of opportunities that are going to come before the city council about how to bring the investment that we need in our downtown to begin to turn our downtown around, right? And just because I am involved in the work of trying to help create those opportunities does not create a conflict of interest in my mind for encouraging the council to take advantage of those possibilities. And you know, the person who I've never met, but I think is a, you know, kind of the person who convinced me that this was an appropriate role is the current mayor of St. Albans, who is also the director of the Franklin County Regional Economic Development Corporation, right? And so if you can hold those things in tension and say out loud, yeah, I've been involved in some of those conversations, right? And we've got a healthy relationship, a partnership between NCDD and the city of Newport, which we do, and will continue to, right? Then those things should work hand in glove and not against one another.
Right. And if you have an open council, there is certainly a place where those on the council or in the audience can say, excuse me.
Are you sure, Rick, that you don't want to think about that? Yeah, I think if asked that question, I would either be able to say, I have thought about it and I've sought counsel and I'm pretty confident that this is an appropriate place to land, or, I hadn't really seen that as a potential conflict. I need to do some consideration of that and let's talk about it further. Yeah, just an open, non-defensive, right? We all get defensive sometimes.
Oh, Lord, yes.
But the truth is, if we can just kind of take a deep breath, you know, just, okay, so I hear your concern, and I'm going to try and take that in the spirit I assume it's intended, which is not deconstructive, but constructive, right? Then let's sort through the issue together.
What do you think are some of the other issues you or anybody else who's elected is going to face?
Well, you know, there's been a concern ever since I became active in Newport around how the budgets work. And I know that the current mayor, and I think to some extent the council as well, this round of budget are looking at it, and I look forward to being a part of that. I've got a lot to learn about that. So that matters to me a great deal. Another thing that I think is of great concern is how we can unlock the space for more businesses that bring meaningful, well-paying jobs to this community. What will that look like? And how do we do it in a way that doesn't sell our soul or our environmental health
Right.
Right. I work a lot with partners from the Northern Forest Center, which is this great organization that works all along the northern border in communities like ours. And they've helped me to learn new language, that we're not just trying to market Newport as a destination, and we're not even just trying to manage Newport's resources for people who come here.
Sure.
We're also responsible for stewarding Newport and its surrounding area so that we have a healthy lake, right, that isn't being poisoned, that people can swim in and enjoy for many generations into the future, right? Or we're trying to create usage of trails in our area that doesn't destroy the very thing that we're trying to create in the first place, right? So how we do that in a way that both kind of on the physical side, but also how do we conserve the values, which I would name as kind of grit and determination and resilience that have made this community thrive for, you know, many decades, right?
Yeah.
How do we conserve those values while still being open to looking toward new possibilities in the future? And that's an interesting balance. You need people who can appreciate both of those things.
It is. It's a challenge. And the other piece that sitting over here is a challenge is, yes, we have this wonderful goal of outdoor recreation. Excites you, it excites me, but it doesn't excite everybody. So those who are struggling with basic survival issues like jobs that pay inadequately, lack of health care, lack of access to childcare, how does that part get brought in?
Well, yes, that's exactly right. So I have a huge concern for housing in this community, and it's got to be a mix.
Yeah.
There needs to be housing that is priced appropriately for folks who are low income so that they can put a reasonable amount of their paycheck into housing every month and not have to short their, you know, their food bill or what they can spend on their children or medication or whatever it may be for, right? So that housing needs to exist. And it's also true that we need decent market rate housing.
Yes.
That is going to be the heart of redriving the economic engine of this community, right? So, and there needs to be a healthy and vibrant nonprofit sector that is creating community service across the kind of boundaries of class, economic class, right? Because there are all kinds of needs in this community. And my whole background is in creating healthy and vibrant nonprofit organizations to better community. That's really what I've spent my whole career doing. So, you know, like I think the world of Orleans County Restorative Justice and the work that they do in this community. And Lynn Gatt, since her arrival, a year and a half ago, is doing very good work. NEK-TV and NEK Learning Services, and there are all kinds of, and there are many others, of course, that I haven't just named. But the point is, somehow our city needs to recognize the value that all of those institutions create together to make this community a livable community for people at every level. That's and a community of security for people at every level, right? It's not that there are no people who are right on the edge. I know of people in this community, or have known in the last year and a half or 2 years, of people who are living in their cars.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And there are all kinds of opportunities to make sure that we're creating a secure community for everyone. That's the goal. Right.
That's great.
Thank you.
So in the last couple of minutes, what do you want voters to know? Why should they vote? Why should they pick Rick?
Thank you. I want folks to know about my grandfather, Archie Powers, who bought land in Lowell in the late 1940s and who died at age 59 of emphysema after working in the asbestos mines in Lowell for much of his career. You know, he was a clear Vermonter through and through. And in many ways he was conservative. He would have disagreed with me politically on a lot of issues in the broader world out there. But he was also a really remarkably open person about how we welcome other people into our community and the support that we provide to our neighbors so that we all get along and we can all survive. And I think of him all the time. My mom is, my folks are still alive and living on the land that my mom grew up on in Lowell. And, you know, my mom, I can't remember a time in my life when my mom wasn't doing things like spending all night helping a girlfriend put wallpaper up in her house. And you know, as recently as the last couple of months, we have good friends in Lowell who lost their home to a fire.
Right.
And my mom at 78 has been over there hours and hours and hours working with them to try and rebuild and get their lives back together. That's the heart, in my judgment, of what it means to be a Vermonter. And even though I never lived here until 3 years ago, when the pandemic started, 4 years ago now almost, you know, the values I learned from my mother, those are values that are deeply ingrained in this community. So I want to hold those values tightly and recognize that there's a world of opportunity out there, and that opening up to that opportunity, as long as we're remembering those values, we kind of create the opportunities around those core values of this community. There's nothing that this little community can't become.
I agree with you. And I say that as a Flatlander.
Yeah.
Who obviously has moved in here and...
Yeah, you know, for years I tried not to be bitter when my cousins would call me a Flatlander, because I was living in Colorado and then Arizona, where our mountains were like 10 to 14,000 feet high, right? And so we would argue about who was the real Flatlander.
You've got the gene pool, you're fine.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You know, some folks would say that I'm definitely an outsider, not a local in many ways. And I get it. I get what this community is looking for. And we are not trying to create North Conway, New Hampshire here.
No.
Right? Or, you know, Aspen, Colorado. What we want here is a community that welcomes its own region. And it's such a vibrant and exciting place to be that others who come here to visit can't help but get excited about being a part of it.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming in, and good luck.
Thank you for all you do with this program and with so much more. Thanks.